cannot come down here and harass these guys because they're black.
A police officer who shot and killed Corey Jones. Today, Numan Raja learning his fate.
We are supposed to be protected by the police, not shot by the police.
In an unexpected investigation of responsibility, the public reaction to racist cops reacting to serving life in prison reveals a sad reality.
Very briefly, though, I want to give my condolences to the Floyd family.
As these officers cope with the fallout from their actions, society has to confront the prevalent prejudice and misuse of authority in the legal profession. This powerful story demonstrates the urgent need for structural change and sparks important conversations about justice, equality, and the way forward. Join us as we have a look at racist cops reacting to serving life in prison. Number 1. Derek Chauvin. In May of 2020, amidst the streets of Minneapolis, the world would witness a heartbreaking incident in the death of George Floyd. George Floyd had gotten caught up in a nightmare that would have consequences worldwide, a fairly unremarkable meeting that was allegedly started with a fake $20 bill turned into a horrifying display of violence. George Floyd's life was in danger at those crucial times, and the oath taken by those responsible with keeping him safe was recklessly broken. An agonizing 9 minutes were spent with Derek Chauvin pressing his knee into Floyd's neck. He paid no attention to Floyd's sobbing or pleas for mercy. Handcuffed and defenseless, the chilling silence of indifference drowned out Floyd's frantic voice. The world stood still, watching in horror as Floyd's life disappeared before their eyes. However, the story did not end in the shadows of that dreadful day. The wheels of justice, albeit moving ponderously, began to turn. The painful reality of their officers' conduct had driven the Minneapolis Police Department to take swift action. The immediate termination of all 4 police officers implicated in this horrible assassination were an admission of the great injustice that had occurred. Despite all of its flaws, the judicial system was put into place. The idealized representation of this terrible deed, Derek Chauvin was investigated by the court. He was convicted in a historic decision of unknowingly committing third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter, and second-degree murder. A turning point in the struggle against institutional racism would be reached when the sentence of 22.5 years in prison was handed down. But amongst the tragedy's gloom, a glimmer of resiliency appeared. The tragic death of George Floyd sparked a global protest against police brutality and racial injustice. People from all across the world had protested, calling for responsibility, equality, and reform, while millions of people used the name George Floyd as a rallying point, serving as a constant reminder that being silent in the face of oppression is complicity. Following this great sadness, dialogues that cut across boundaries and ideologies began. Communities got together, acknowledging the underlying problems that had afflicted society for many years. Number 2. Numan Raja. Corey Jones was stranded on the side of the road the night that he lost his life in 2015, and justice would finally be delivered when former South Florida police officer Numan Raja would be sentenced to 25 years in prison for his crime. The tense courtroom had observed Raja, who was now a bearded man wearing a prison uniform, as he dealt with the repercussions of his conduct. The judge delivered the decision in a scenario that was right out of a suspenseful courtroom drama, leaving many on the edge of their seats. Raja had been convicted of murder and attempted murder in the first degree in connection with a gunshot that wounded Corey Jones, the man whose only offense was crossing his path at the wrong time. Throughout the trial, the defense had painted a picture of self-defense, arguing that Raja had no choice but to use lethal force against Jones, who, unknown to the officer, was a licensed gun owner. However, prosecutors would present a compelling case, asserting that the officer's actions had initiated a confrontation. The prosecution had contended that the officer, working undercover that night, had failed to properly identify himself as a law enforcement officer, leading Jones to believe that he was facing a dangerous situation with a robber. As Jones's family and loved ones poured their hearts out in court, demanding justice for their lost son, nephew, and friend, tensions would escalate. Mark Johnson emotionally urged the judge to sentence Raja to life in prison on behalf of the grieving family, highlighting the irreparable harm that he had caused them. The officer's friends and family stood by his side while the events took place, giving the impression that he was a committed police officer and a caring family guy. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office deputy and Newman Raja's brother voiced their surprise at the proceedings, saying that the prosecution had been carried out for the political reasons. He defended his brother's integrity by referring to him as a strong American Muslim who had unintentionally fallen victim to a greater racial narrative. The courtroom drama came to a conclusion, leaving society to reflect on the complexities of the case. And for Jones's family, it was a bittersweet victory, a reminder that justice would prevail even in the face of tragedy. As the courtroom doors closed, the echoes of the proceedings lingered on, serving as a strong indicator of the need for accountability and transparency within the criminal justice system. It's a sad reminder that no one is above the law, and that, in pursuing justice, even those in positions of authority must answer for their actions. Number 3. David Oliver. David Oliver is a former Brimfield police chief who entered a plea of no contest to 4 misdemeanor counts in court with a heavy heart. He was obviously agitated and therefore paused for a great long time. The author of the book No Mopes Allowed, who formerly had a prominent position in the community and enjoyed a sizable following on social media, had experienced a startling fall from grace. However, it was evident that the judge, when she delivered her decision, had violated the fundamental principles that he had written about. The allegations originate from his disturbing behavior towards female police officer Crystal Casterline, which includes assault, illegal restraint, attempted theft in the course of official business, and unauthorized use of property. Casterline, who had been subjected to Oliver's verbal, physical, and emotional abuse, had appeared before the judge, expressing her dissatisfaction with the plea deal. She firmly believed that someone in Oliver's position should be held to a higher standard, not granted a get-out-of-jail-free card. David Oliver's tenure as a police chief abruptly ended in January of 2015, following a 2-week suspension after she had filed a complaint against him and initiated a civil lawsuit. The criminal case remained shrouded in secrecy until the last minute, with charges filed only an hour before the court appearance. As Margaret Tamaro, the special prosecutor from the Ohio Attorney General's office, read the case's details, it became apparent that Oliver had assaulted Casterline, held her against her will, illegally auctioned off confiscated weapons, and pocketed the proceeds. Oliver's defense attorney argued that the small-town politics would play a role in the case, and Oliver opted for a no-contest plea to protect his family. During the proceedings, he had claimed that Casterline had also resorted to violence, stating that she had punched him as much as he punched her. However, the overwhelming evidence of his misconduct had painted a much different picture. In her emotionally charged testimony, Casterline recounted her initial excitement at being hired as a Brimfield officer and the gradual descent into a nightmare. She had described Oliver's inappropriate behavior, from unwelcome hugging to groping, invasive questioning about her personal life, and suggestive texts. The abuse escalated, leading to physical altercations, verbal abuse, and bruises on her arms and legs. Inside the police station, Oliver's behavior would be described as sadistic and sociopathic, causing immense suffering to Casterline's mental and physical well-being. Despite 6 months on leave and battling depression and suicidal thoughts, Casterline persevered, vowing to return to the Brimfield Police Department and determined not to allow Oliver to rob her of her love for her community and profession. As the judge imposed suspended jail sentences, probation, and fines on Oliver, Casterline supporters broke into applause, celebrating her courage. Yet Oliver, stubborn and unrepentant, blamed his predicament on management disputes and union conflict. He pledged to take his case to the court of public opinion, once again turning to Facebook to share his own perspective. In a dramatic turn of events, the man who had once wielded power and influence had found himself on the other side of the law, facing the consequences of his actions in a community divided by his behavior. Number 4. Amber Geiger. The former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger received a 10-year prison term for the sad passing of Botham Jean in a courtroom spectacle that was full of raw emotion. When Brant Jean, the brother of Botham, made an exceptional act of forgiveness shortly after the sentencing was handed down, the case took an unexpected turn. His sincere comments resounded across the courtroom, exuding a tone of kindness and grace that contradicted the gravity of the circumstance. His words would resonate through the courtroom, shocking everyone with the love and empathy that he expressed. And in an act of profound forgiveness, he had said his desires for Geiger to find redemption, urging her to embrace faith as her victim would have wanted. The unexpected scene did not end there, though. The judge, deeply moved by Brandt's compassion, approached Geiger, holding a Bible open to John 3:16. "This is where you start," she said, emphasizing the power of spiritual transformation. The remarkable display of forgiveness and healing would leave the courtroom in awe, with observers describing it as an amazing act of healing. Geiger's conviction had stemmed from a nightmarish incident in 2018 when she mistakenly entered Botham Jean's apartment and shot him, claiming self-defense. During the trial, disturbing text messages would be revealed, shedding light upon Geiger's mindset and raising questions about her racial biases. In one letter, she callously remarked about Martin Luther King Day, and in another, she admitted to hating everything and everyone. After considering the evidence and the gravity of the crime, the jury had delivered a sentence that left activists disheartened. However, Brandt Jean's forgiveness became a beacon of hope, an example of the power of love overcoming hatred. His words, spoken in the face of tragedy, echo the sentiment that forgiveness has the potential to heal even the deepest of wounds. As the nation grappled with issues of racial injustice and police accountability, the courtroom saga served as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. Amid the darkness, forgiveness emerged as a guiding light, illuminating the path toward redemption and understanding. Botham Jean's legacy lives on as a victim and a symbol of forgiveness, inspiring a nation to confront its challenges with compassion and grace. Number 5. Daniel Holtzclaw. Daniel Holtzclaw was a former Oklahoma City police officer who preyed upon African American women for 6 months and was given a sentence that reflects the shouts of those he tormented in stunning triumph against injustice. Holtzclaw's destiny was sealed when he was given a stunning 263 years in prison by a jury that was unmoved by the heinousness of his actions and steadfast in handing down the punishment he deserved. His victims, who had ranged in age from 17 to 57, shed tears, but they were not in vain. This historic decision represented not only the downfall of a dishonest police officer, but the glimmer of hope for many unidentified women who had been the targets of prejudice, persecution, and violence. The importance of his conviction was eloquently highlighted by attorney Benjamin Crump, a steadfast supporter of justice who had stressed that it was a triumph not only for the OKC 13, but for a whole community that was plagued by victimization and fear. Holtzclaw's nefarious deeds, which included horrible offenses like first-degree assault and forced intimacy, brought shame upon the very organization created to serve the interests of the public. His selection of victims was tainted by racial prejudice, and the jury correctly condemned this terrible misuse of authority. In the midst of the darkness, the bravery of those who testified shines brilliantly. The horrifying description of Ligon's meeting with Holtzclaw, in which she had resisted an armed police officer and maintained her ground, is an example of the resiliency of the human spirit. Another victim bravely shared her story, revealing the depths of Holtzclaw's depravity. Despite being intoxicated and vulnerable, her courage in speaking out against her abuser showcased the strength that lies within survivors. Holtzclaw's actions had violated bodies and shattered trust in law enforcement, leaving scars that may never fully heal. The trial, marred by racial tension from the beginning, had culminated in a verdict that transcended the confines of a courtroom. It's an example of the power of truth, resilience, and unity against the darkest of forces. The echoes of the outcry for justice have reverberated far beyond the courtroom walls, sparking conversations about systemic racism and the urgent need for change. The world watches as Holtzclaw's legal battle continues, hoping that justice will prevail at every step. The strength of his victims and their determination to see him held accountable serves as a clarion call for a society that refuses to bow down to oppression. This case stands as a strong indicator that no one is above the law, and that the courage of a few can topple even the mightiest of giants. Number 6. Wayne Couzens. Wayne Couzens, a violent police officer, has been shown to have sent frightening texts and engaged in inappropriate conduct. He joked about the violation and had indecent talks with his co-workers in a WhatsApp group 2 years before assassinating Sarah Everett. These texts, which were just made public, revealed the incredibly unsettling attitude of a guy charged with protecting the law. The messages, concealed due to ongoing court proceedings, related Cousins to exposing himself to 3 women and providing a disturbing insight into the culture within the police force. He and a few other fellow officers were jailed for 3 months for their involvement, exchanged offensive remarks about race, women, assault, violence, intimate orientation, gender reassignment, and disability. The conversations were shocking and deeply troubling, revealing a lack of respect for the values the police force is supposed to protect. In one alarming message from February of 2019, Cousins had joked about non-consensual sex, and the officer with whom he was texting responded in the same way. This callous conversation highlighted a shocking disregard for consent and decency within the police ranks. Even more concerning, in March of 2019, an officer mentioned responding to an unconscious woman. Cousins callously asked a highly inappropriate question, to which the other officer responded the same way. These conversations reflect an appalling lack of empathy and professionalism, and the messages also revealed racism, with Cousins making derogatory remarks, further fueling concerns about systemic racism within the police force. Equally disturbing is that despite receiving reports of indecent exposure incidents, the police had failed to take any meaningful action against Cousins. These missed opportunities to apprehend him allowed him to continue his predatory behavior, ultimately leading to the tragic abduction, violation, and death of Sarah Everard. Justice May rightly condemned Scotland Yard for doing nothing to stop the man, stating that he could have easily been traced after committing multiple indecent exposure attacks, and she emphasized that the lack of police response only reinforced his dangerous belief in his invincibility and ability to abuse women without consequence. These revelations have scarred victims with survivor's guilt, as both Kent Police and the Metropolitan Police had failed to take the crime seriously enough, neglecting crucial opportunities to further prevent harm. The system's failure to hold Cousins accountable when these crimes were reported is deeply disturbing, and as everyone grapples with these shocking revelations, it's clear that a thorough examination of police culture and accountability mechanisms are urgently needed. The ongoing investigation, which includes an independent inquiry, are crucial to understanding the extent of Cousins' earlier intimate offenses and identifying where opportunities to stop him had been missed. In the wake of the scandal, the police force needed to regain public trust by addressing systemic issues while ensuring accountability for officers who engage in misconduct. The victims deserve justice, and the memory of Sarah Everard serves as a reminder that no one should be above the law, not even those who are sworn to uphold it. Number 7. Matthew Dagas. The city of La Mesa found itself in the national limelight. A justice movement had erupted all across the country in May of 2020, leaving a day forever implanted in the national memory. It all begins with the awful photos of Omri Johnson, a young black man being mistreated by Officer Matt Dagas, and the horrific death of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. These events would spark a strong appeal for racial justice and equality, not only in the hearts of Americans in La Mesa, but all over the country. In the midst of the chaos, a viral video would circulate depicting the officer's actions at a trolley stop, actions that sparked outrage and galvanized protesters. Omri Johnson had found himself at the center of controversy, initially charged with assaulting an officer and resisting arrest. But the truth, captured by police body cameras and viral videos, had prevailed, leading to the dropping of charges against Johnson. The justice system took a different turn for the officer, and after a trial that held the nation's breath, Officer Dagas was not found guilty, a verdict that left the city torn in disbelief and non-acceptance. The echoes of the decision reverberated all throughout the city, igniting conversations that went deep into the heart of justice, race, and law enforcement. In the aftermath, the community was grappling with the repercussions of the verdict, and social media platforms would buzz with voices of outrage and disbelief. Social media users would question the vanishing concept of justice, while others had found the outcome expected, given the available evidence. The story would take another twist when a man involved in destroying landmarks across La Mesa would be indicted, and that left many people in shock. His light sentence would spark controversy, with residents like Councilmember Lothian expressing concern about the leniency shown to criminals, fearing it might embolden future lawbreakers. Yet, amidst the outcry, there were differing opinions. One person saw the officer's acquittal as a triumph for law enforcement, a stance that Glenn Grant supported, highlighted by the perceived disparity in punishments for Officer Dagas and Cooper. The case, both complex and emotionally charged, had left the city pondering the very essence of justice. As it navigated these turbulent waters, the courtroom drama would be far from over. The officers turned to civil courts, seeking resolution and closure. The battle for justice was fought on multiple fronts and continued to shape the narrative of the city and, by extension, the nation. In the face of adversity, the city was left to grapple profound questions about justice, fairness, and the path forward. The echoes of that night reverberated not only through the Las Mesas streets, but across the entire country, serving as a strong indicator of the challenges that society faced in the pursuit of true equality and justice for all. Number 8. Daniel Saylor. Former Windermere Police Chief Daniel Saylor, once a representation of law and order, had unexpectedly found himself on the wrong side of the law in 2014. He was ultimately freed from prison after serving a tough 8-year term, bringing an unpleasant chapter to a close. When Saylor was detained on suspicion of perjury and corruption, his downward spiral began, but his wrongdoings continued. Saylor's evil deeds followed him all throughout prison, haunting him like a ghost. He had made an attempt to hamper an inquiry into a close friend who was charged with terrible actions against a young girl, and surprisingly, Saylor attempted to pay his own police to tell the truth to social workers, all in a desperate bid to cover up the truth. The sordid tale unfolded in the picturesque town of Windermere, a place known for its serenity and affluence, and the police force had gained international attention, not for their heroics, but for their questionable handling of a high-profile incident that involved golf legend Tiger Woods. Despite everything, Saylor's downfall reached a new depth when he would be arrested on charges of bribing an official and official misconduct. As investigations into his actions intensified, it would become clear that Saylor had abused his position of power to obstruct justice. He destroyed crucial evidence related to the investigation, showing a complete disregard for the law that he was sworn to uphold. His audacious attempts to manipulate the system stunned even seasoned law enforcement officials. Special agents expressed their dismay, stating that the chief had used his position to hinder the investigation. The case, described by State Attorney Lawson Lamar, was ugly, raised disturbing questions about his motivations. Why would someone risk their career, freedom, and reputation to aid a friend involved in such heinous crimes? Saylor's actions left the community in shock and disbelief, and his suspension from duty without pay further underscored the severity of his transgressions. Today, as he faces consequences of his choices in court, the world watches on, astounded by the lengths to which a once respected police officer would go to protect a criminal. In the aftermath of this disturbing saga, the town and the world at large were left grappling with the betrayal of trust. Number 9. Joe Arpaio. Joe Arpaio was once a dreaded sheriff, but was now in line for stiff revenge in a startling change of events. This narrative of responsibility and the victory of the rule of law, not merely the downfall of a strong lawman. The district judge in Arizona convicted the former sheriff, who was referred to as America's toughest sheriff around the country, guilty of criminal contempt. When the U.S. District Judge issued an injunction in 2011 ordering Arpaio and his deputies to halt racial profiling of Latino drivers, the dispute became underway, and despite the unequivocal directive, Arpaio's deputies persisted in their actions for an incredible 18 months, which had sparked concerns of racial profiling. Arpaio and his defenders argued that the violations were unintentional, citing poor communication and a lack of clarity in the judge's order. However, another judge would firmly reject these claims, stating that Arpaio had willfully violated the order by failing to ensure his subordinates' compliance. For Arpaio, a man who had spent 24 years as the sheriff of Maricopa County, this conviction marked the end of an era. His severe enforcement policies, which gained him praise in conservative circles, had also attracted vehement criticism for alleged racial profiling. His tenure came to a halt when he lost his re-election bid 2 weeks after being charged with criminal contempt. Despite his claims that the case was merely politically motivated, the ruling reaffirmed the importance of upholding the Constitution while ensuring equal protections under the law. The Mexican-American League Defense and Education Fund had applauded the decision, emphasizing that it underscored the constitutional requirement for evidence before detaining or arresting undocumented immigrants. Arpaio's conviction served as a reminder that no one, regardless of their status or power, was above the law, a clear example of the perseverance of justice and the resilience of the American legal system. As the nation watches on, the former sheriff awaits his sentencing, facing the possibility of 6 months in jail and a monetary fine. This chapter in Arpaio's life stands as a cautionary tale, reminding everyone that justice will prevail, even in the face of the most powerful figures. Number 10. David Carrick. In a shocking tale of betrayal behind the badge, a former Metro police officer named David Carrick had been handed a life sentence for heinous crimes against a dozen women that spanned almost 2 decades. The serial rapist, who had once worn the uniform that was meant to protect, admitted guilt in 49 offenses, which included 24 counts of assault, attempted assault, and false imprisonment, showcasing one of the most appalling cases that involved a serving police officer. Carrick, who shamelessly exploited his position of power, unleashed a reign of terror on these women, believing that he was untouchable. Justice Bobby Chima Grubb did not mince her words during the sentencing, describing Carrick's actions as taking monstrous advantage of women while hiding behind a facade of trustworthiness. His victims endured unspeakable horrors, their lives forever scarred by his brutality. London's police force would publicly express profound remorse to the victims, acknowledging the evil that was perpetrated by Carrick. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley issued a heartfelt apology, emphasizing the depths of his depravity and disgrace that had been brought upon the force. The Metropolitan Police, once a symbol of security, had now faced a crisis of confidence due to a series of scandals eroding the public's trust. This case was a strong indicator of the pressing need for reform within law enforcement, and the Home Secretary would rightly label Carrick's crimes as a scar on the police, highlighting urgency for change. An ongoing inquiry delves into Carrick's behavior and the flawed vetting processes which allowed him to join the force, sparking a necessary conversation about accountability and transparency within the police ranks. In the face of this appalling betrayal, society must stand united against such wickedness and demand justice not only for the victims, but for the very essence of trust and safety that has been shattered.